The Super Nintendo, a fantastic game system with an amazing array of addicting games. Fighters, shooters, platformers, and puzzle games galore. So let's check out some of these games from this system that keep me coming back again and again, starting with Alien vs. Predator. I absolutely love the Alien franchise, and this one drew me in because it allows you to beat up those nasty aliens. You can do the standard punching attack and also pick up specials like combi sticks, discs, and invisibility globes. You also have the ability to slide attack, which is necessary for taking out face huggers and chest bursters. There's also a laser you can shoot in one of 3 different power levels. The highest power level is your super weapon that takes a bit of your life. The graphics are admittedly a little drab, but I think the aliens look pretty cool. The sounds and the gameplay are a little meh. I mean, you never fight more than 2 aliens on screen at once. Not the greatest game, but I do find myself coming back to it occasionally to kick some alien butt. Arcade's greatest hits, the Atari Collection. As you know, classic Atari arcade games are my favorite, so there's no way I could resist this collection. Asteroids is very good and fun, although it does seem to be a little zoomed out. Battlezone has terrible controls. I cannot figure out what I'm supposed to do here. Centipede is good, but it's tough to play with a controller. But Missile Command is great even without the trackball. Super Breakout is okay, but I didn't see any way to speed up your paddle. And lastly, Tempest is, well, Tempest. It's the best. This is a really great collection. Batman Returns. Here's another great beat-em-up for the Super Nintendo. Is this the best Batman game ever made? Well, maybe. I'd say it's at least the best 16-bit Batman game ever made. I can't think of a Sega Genesis Batman game that's this good. The hits are super satisfying, and sometimes there's stuff to interact with like windows, trash cans, and walls. What I like about this game is that there's many different stages and enemies because, yeah, I get bored easily. So this one does keep me pretty engaged. There's even a stage where you drive the Batmobile, which is the best Batmobile ever. My only disappointment is that you don't get to drive the Bat ski boat. Oh well. But it doesn't matter. Beating up the Penguin's minions never gets old. Battletoads in Battlemaniacs. I'm starting to notice a trend with my picks here. Yeah, I love beat-em-up games. What makes this one different than the other ones on this list? Well, the Battletoads are just a riot in my book. Yeah, some people would call them a cheap knockoff of the Ninja Turtles, but they're not really anything like the Turtles except they're, green-ish. Pimple, Zitz, and Rash use their fists to attack, and it feels just so good punching those pigs. This one is more than just fighting, though. There's homages to stages from the NES game, like the dreaded Turbo Tunnel. There's lots of clever stage designs, too, even though I can't see them without using the Game Genie, because I suck. But it doesn't matter. I still keep wanting to play this one over and over again. Bust a Move. Oh man, this one had me addicted for months. Just aim your bubble at the advancing group of bubbles, and if you get 3 of the same color touching, they'll disappear. If there's bubbles below them, then they'll drop off too. It's a very simple idea, but executed perfectly. Sometimes you have to be a little thoughtful about how you aim your bubble. You might need to bounce it off the wall to get it where you want it to go. And if you miss, and you will, then you'll have to figure out how to get rid of that extra bubble. The graphics are nice and colorful, and the sound is wonderfully suited for this game. Very satisfying and fun. Donkey Kong Country. Here's one that I think many of you would agree with. In Donkey Kong Country, you are on a quest to eat as many bananas as possible. Right? Again, I don't really care for the actual story, I just enjoy the gameplay. Oh, and the graphics. They're pre-rendered, of course, but they don't look awful. I guess it helps if your characters don't try to look super realistic. Controls are also great in this one as you jump and spin attack your enemies. The level design is also clever, and there's always something new to look at or do. And let's not forget the wonderful music. It fits the game absolutely perfectly. You just cannot go wrong with this game. It's a win for just so many reasons. Doom. Okay, I'm going to say up front that Doom for the Super Nintendo is not the best port. But if I had a Super Nintendo as my main console, I'd certainly enjoy playing this version a lot. What surprises me about this game, though, is the music. It is really amazing. Is there a Super FX chip for sound, too? Graphics are a little weak, but the gameplay is mostly there. I'm actually kind of surprised that they attempted this on the Super Nintendo, but hey, you know, it's been ported to calculators too, so why not? Final Fight. I remember seeing this in EGM magazine when the Super Nintendo was first released. I thought, wow, the SNES can really do an arcade perfect port. And then I went out and bought a Genesis. Anyway, I came to find out later that no, this game is not arcade perfect, but the graphics do look pretty good for the most part. The gameplay is also quite close to the arcade, even though they made changes to some of the characters like Poison and a couple of the others. Another downside is that there are fewer enemies on the screen. Oh, and there's no guy. Hard to believe Capcom didn't want to pony up the dough for a little more memory just to add him. Even with all the shortcomings, I still think of this game as arcade perfect thanks to those early impressions. Thanks, EGM. Kirby's Avalanche. Puzzle games are just the most addictive games, aren't they? Well, I mean, at least they are for me. And this one is the first Puyo Puyo game that I ever played, so it's kind of special. The goal here is to drop the jelly blobs to match 4 in a row and do it better than your opponent. How can you do that? Well, by chaining multiple blobs to appear. You see, when blobs disappear, the ones above drop down. If 4 or more touch again, then your opponent gets an avalanche of clear blobs dropped on him. I love the competitive aspect of this game and how Kirby is just so happy to knock them out. It can get pretty tough though in the later stages, but defeating those guys is very satisfying. Mortal Kombat 2. This is my go-to fighting game on practically any system, and I've heard said that the Super Nintendo version is the best port of the arcade ever made. It sure looks very close to the arcade, even if the resolution took a pretty big hit. Also, the speed of the game just feels a little off to me. And the controls are good in the sense that you have all the buttons represented, but the Super Nintendo controller is a little challenging to pull off the moves with your thumb. You kind of have to contort your hand and play with your fingers. But if you can get over those issues, this is a great version of Mortal Kombat 2. Funny how quickly Nintendo changed their tune about the violence after Mortal Kombat was so critically panned. NBA Jam Tournament Edition. You know the drill. Play 2-on-2 basketball as your favorite NBA team against all other NBA teams.
From the outside.
The kicker here, though, as if you didn't already know, is that you can perform some totally awesome super dunks. This one also includes line scrolling on the floor to give it that 3D look. There's no music in the Super Nintendo game, which is a little strange, and there's only a few voice samples by announcer Tim Kitzrow.
For two! Hello!
However, I find any version of this game addicting, and I think it's that constant dopamine hit you get from making a basket. For just a moment, it makes me feel as though I'm actually a good basketball player in real life.
Monster Jam! Yes!
Ninja Warriors. A highly improved version of the original arcade game, this one should have been called Super Ninja Warriors. The highly detailed graphics are so much better than the original, not to mention the faster and more enjoyable gameplay. Oh, and the fact that you can play as different characters adds a lot of variety. There's a lot going on in the game which keeps players engaged. You're constantly battling new enemies and learning new ways to attack them. Also, the background graphics never get old. There's always something new to look at. This is just a really great action game all around, and it never gets boring. SimCity. I used to play this a lot on my Atari ST computer, and I was surprised that this one was one of the launch titles for the Super Nintendo. Really? Kids wanted to play this? I think it may have been a favorite of Miyamoto's. What I find addictive about this one is trying to make your city as perfect as possible. How can I arrange these zones so that I get roads and trains to every one of them and keep the population happy? One thing to remember, lowering your tax rate will increase the population and then you'll get even more tax money. Crazy how that works, isn't it? The graphics are nothing to write home about, but using your mind in an attempt to create perfection, oh, it's just so addicting. Star Fox. There's just something wonderful about this era of 3D graphics. The flat shaded polygons look much cleaner than texture mapped ones. This means that you're focused on the gameplay rather than the cool looking graphics. And the brightly colored and varied background graphics suit the game just right too. Zipping around in the R-Wing blasting enemies feels very smooth and fast. Well, at least to me. I guess the frame rate isn't all that great, but I really don't notice it that much. The character interactions are pretty fun, and I like this game's vibe. And let's not forget the boss battles that are well done and very creative. This is truly a special game, and I wish Nintendo would get back to this series. We need more Star Foxes. Street Fighter II Turbo, Hyper Fighting. The original Street Fighter game was a bit of a disaster, so I'm a little surprised that Capcom made a sequel to that game, but I'm very glad that they did. This one is actually the sequel to the sequel where you get to play as the boss characters now. That's cool and all, but I usually just play as Ken, probably because I know his and Ryu's moves by heart. The other addition to this version is the ability to speed up the gameplay up to 4 stars worth. Of course, the Genesis game goes up to 10, but who's counting? What makes this addicting is the gameplay. I love whipping up on my opponent with those special moves. And yeah, the Hadouken is a little cheap, but that also makes it fun for me. Sunset Riders. Right off the bat, I know why this game is addicting. It's the colorful graphics, run and gun gameplay, and comedic style. You know when the boss exclaims,
"Marry me with my money,"
that this game is not taking itself too seriously, and I really like that. The shooting action reminds me of Contra, and I love me a good Contra game. Also, it feels as if this game would be easy, and that's something really, really tempting for me because, you know, I suck at games. I mean, who wants to play a game where you're constantly losing and having to start over again? Not me. The The different game styles also keeps me curious to see what's next. More shooting action, or will we be riding a horse this time? Or maybe we'll be dodging a stampede. You just never know. Well, I guess you would know if you played the game all the way through. Super Castlevania 4. I've never gotten too far into this one or any of the Castlevania games. I just suck so bad at them. I don't know, my timing is always off when a bat or a Medusa head comes at me. But no matter, this game still keeps me wanting to play it again and again. Maybe it's the awesome graphics, sound, and music. Or maybe it's that satisfying whip attack, probably the greatest weapon ever outside of the Contra spread gun. Or shotgun, if you prefer. The setting is fantastic. There just aren't a lot of horror games out there, but this one is one of the best, if not the best ever, and I will never turn down a chance to play it, even if I suck. Super Double Dragon. I discovered this one a few months back, and I really took to it. Sure, it's another beat 'em up, but this one has a unique charm of its own. It's not at all like the original game in terms of graphics, sounds, or even story. Well, I don't know, maybe your mission is to save Marion too, or just go around and beat up thugs? But hey, I could go for either. Besides the standard punches and kicks, you also need to learn how to counterattack your enemies. That makes this extra enjoyable because now they can never hit you. If only that were true. The characters are a little smaller here, but there's lots of great animation to marvel at. I especially love getting new weapons like swords and sticks to attack with. Don't sleep on this game, it is really great. Super Mario All-Stars. It's 4 games in 1! The original NES Mario games spruced up with better graphics and sounds. Of all of these though, the original is still my favorite. And while I do love this game, there is one problem with it. Did you ever notice that Mario continues to jump through a block instead of bouncing back down? That just doesn't feel right. But that's okay, this one looks much improved and I just want to play it anyway. And considering that this cartridge also includes the amazing Mario 3, you just can't go wrong. Oh, and some weirdos actually like Mario 2. That game is just, Okay, moving on to Super Mario Kart. So this is where it all began, huh? With small flat tracks, power-ups that don't respawn, 7 opponents, and admittedly fantastic controls. There are numerous different tracks with different obstacles. I prefer the normal outdoor tracks because you can't fall off the sides or get stopped by a wall like in the Ghost House or Castle tracks. What I love about this one though are the buttery smooth controls. Well, the steering is great anyway. I do wish that the buttons to activate your power-ups were one of the shoulder buttons instead of A. This means you really have to contort your hand to press it while holding the accelerator. There's also some great 2-player modes that are actually more fun when playing with a friend. Come on, get moving, Yoshi, don't just sit there. Oh yeah, well I'm just gonna hit you anyways. Take that. Even though I prefer the later versions of the game, this one is still fun and addictive. Super Mario World. Now this one is right up my alley. Super easy with a huge variety of colorful graphics, it's very satisfying to play. I also like that the stages are relatively short. Do the later stages get longer? I'm asking you, the guy who's played this game all the way through. Riding Yoshi is pretty fun, and I like his triple fireball attack that he can use after he eats an enemy. Controls are absolutely perfect, and there's nothing about them that could be better. Also, the music is just amazing, and for a change, my ears really enjoy it. And that's saying something, because normally I find music in video games to be rather annoying. Needless to say, I love this game even if I haven't played it all the way through. It just might be my favorite Mario game ever. Super Punch-Out! An update of the original Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, this version has amazing graphics, sounds, and controls. But for some reason, it's not as beloved as the original. At least that's the vibe I get from the internet. Maybe because Little Mac isn't your boxer this time? Or maybe because the roster of opponents aren't the same? Who knows? The sounds and animation really make the hits feel way more substantial. You still need to figure out your opponent's attacks just like the original. And I love some of the facial expressions they make when they get hit. Some of those really crack me up. Fortunately, the controls are intuitive and responsive, so even beginners like me can be knocking out Gabby J in no time. Sorry, Iron Mike, your game is good, but this is my favorite boxing game of all time. Super Smash TV. I'm an arcade game fanatic, and I remember playing this one over and over again in, well, the arcades. The dual joystick controls are extremely satisfying to use, and the graphics were so very detailed it felt like I was playing the game in HD versus the standard definition of its predecessor, Robotron. The Super Nintendo version is practically arcade perfect. The controller is absolutely suited for this type of control with the 4-button arrangement. It's not quite as good as actual joysticks, but it does the job. I'm also happy that Nintendo didn't censor this game and kept all the blood and gore. It's really not the same without it. And let's not forget the awesome unique weapons that you can use. My favorite are the rockets because they just slice right through your enemies. Definitely the best home version of this arcade classic. Now where's my brand new VCR? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. This one just might be the best beat 'em up on the Super Nintendo. Do you agree with that? Let me know down in the comments. Oh, and you can watch my video where I played through the whole game. Anyway, the bright and cartoony graphics look nearly identical to the Turtles in Time arcade game. But I think this one is a little better though, because it includes more and sometimes rearranged stages. Naturally, you can play as your favorite turtle, and they all have slightly different abilities and special attacks. The gameplay can get a little repetitive, beating up the same annoying enemies over and over again, but this one tries to mix things up with different environments and stage designs. In my view, this is the pinnacle of Ninja Turtles video games. Tetris and Dr Mario. Tetris is probably my favorite game of all time, and without question, the most addicting game ever made. This version of Tetris has a versus mode, which adds an extra element of fun to the game. I noticed that this version is also a remake of the NES game, which is probably not the best version ever, but hey, it's Tetris, so it's just automatically good. The controls feel a little bit sluggish, but you know, I kind of got used to it. Dr. Mario is also very good with improved graphics over the NES game. This one also includes a versus mode, and it's challenging to defeat that enemy virus. Both of these games are good fun, though, especially Tetris. Well, that's gonna do it. A bunch of games for the Super Nintendo that I find addicting. What games keep you coming back again and again on the system? Let me know down in the comments. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.